All right, we're going to talk about gender brain wiring differences. As I told you before, of all the topics I present, I think male-female differences are the most fun for me. Because I don't care whether you're partnered or not. You know, we deal with people of the opposite gender all the time. It's kind of fun to have some idea of what's going on in their brain, although nobody is a mind reader. So this is what I call the who I am pyramid. It's what I believe every brain needs to know about itself to use your brain by design, not just flying by the seat of your pants. And you can see that the bottom foundational layer of this who I am pyramid is whether you have a female, almost said female. Maybe I am picking up an accent. Ooh, that would be lovely. Whether you have a female empathizing brain or a male systemizing brain, or whether you have a 50-50 brain. When I was here 3 years ago, we didn't know much about the 50-50 brain. We just knew that it was neither completely empathizing or completely systemizing, although neither of those are completely. You know, the empathizing brain, you still know how to put your clothes on, underwear first. I mean, that's a systemizing thing. And the systemizing brain still is able to be empathetic by choice. But the 50-50 brain are literally half and half. The clear, you know, bottom line 50-50 brain is also 50-50 in terms of bodily structure. So this is now called the intersex brain. And those individuals either have one ovary and one testicle, or a clump of tissue that has both ovarian and testicular tissue in it. And we're learning so much more that we had no idea. You know, when I went to nursing school, we thought everybody was XX, XY, and it was pretty straight. But it's not. There's XX, X0, just one X chromosome, XXX. There's XY, there's XXY, XXXY, XXXXY. And some people are born with a brain that doesn't match the body in which it's housed. And some of those, when the discomfort eventually becomes so bad, they choose to go through the hormonal and surgical process trying to get a body to match their brain. So we have not even scratched the iceberg, if you will, on the differences that we are now seeing throughout the world. Then you've got the next layer up, just for interest's sake, is if you were born and raised in the eastern part of our planet versus the western part of the planet, your brain is structurally slightly different. And that's called the new neuroscience of where you were born, basically. So if you go to my website, you can look that up and find some of the ways in which those brains differ. It's fun. The next layer is, are you an extrovert, ambivert, or introvert? Because that means how comfortable you are in specific environments. Your sensory preference, when you're subjected to all types of sensory data, what registers in your brain fastest, what you take in through your eyes, your ears, or smell, taste, and touch. And finally you get to the top, and that's called brain bent. Which of these 4 chunks of cerebral tissue has your energy advantage? And there's a huge difference in that energy advantage. If you figure out which of those matches your energy advantage, think that you're spending $1 per second when you're using that part of the brain. Any place else in the brain, it's $100 per second. So if you can match the majority of what you do with this easy energy efficiency, you're likely to be much more successful. So then we've got gender differences, so we're talking about this part, foundational. They're here to stay. It's not going to change. Somebody emailed me the other day and said, if I come to your male-female differences seminar and learn more about them, will it make the differences go away? No, it won't. And it would be really boring if it did. I mean, part of the fun in life is how different we are. You know, even if you don't understand where the other person's coming from, it's really fun to see how different their brains are. So, research updates. I do not, repeat, do not understand your brain. Okay, here's the first takeaway. You don't even understand your own. Because if you did, you would be consistently successful. Because all the secrets of success are already built into your brain. So you don't even understand your own brain. So stop expecting anybody else to understand it. You're never going to understand theirs either. Psychological testing is all we had before we got brain scans to find out some of the differences in male-female differences. And from the time that psychological testing was started, consistently, researchers have found a significant difference between male brains and female brains and their ability to perform specific types of tasks. Males outperform females in some tests, and females outperform males in others. I lectured for the National Organization of Women in the United States once. Their platform is, anything you can do, I can do better. Some of them didn't like it when I told them, you know, that doesn't dovetail with brain research. You know, there's some things that I do better than the average male, and there's some things males do better than the average female, and that's why we need to work together. But no, anything a male can do, I cannot do better. Get a grip. But here we have the fact that the research comes out in generalizations. You know, the bell curve of distribution. In general, for example, men are better at finding directions, reading a map. Not so bad now that we have GPS, but even then. But there are some women, actually, who can do it better than some men. But in general, you know, nearly 3/4 of men are going to do it much better than women. So, here are some of the things that traditional wisdom, before we got brain scans, have identified. Reading maps and direction finding, males tend to do that better, as I mentioned, hands down. Spatial abilities using muscles. It's just amazing what males can do. I love watching, especially Winter Olympics, because I was born in the middle of the winter in Calgary, 56 degrees below zero Fahrenheit when I came out the chute. I don't know what that translates to Celsius, but anyway. So I love watching Winter Olympics. And often they will have events that men do and that women do. Of course, they're not going to compete against each other, duh. Males have 3 times the upper body strength, twice the lower body strength than a comparably sized female. I mean, that's huge. Any of you gentlemen want to open the door for me or carry my bag? Have at it. It's going to be so easy for you. It'll feel like picking up a Kleenex box and I'm lugging it along. Driving, we'll talk a little bit about that. More skilled drivers, but you guys tend to see better in daylight. Your wives, all things being equal, are going to see a lot better at night. I don't know if you follow the Indy 500 race car circuit at all in the United States. But if you do, how many women are on the circuit? One. Has she ever won? No. I mean, she must be very unusual to even be competing at that level. But it's not something that the female brain does easily. When it comes to traditional wisdom for females, anything to do with verbal tasks, and you often see this on IQ tests. You know, they're just one measure of intelligence. But when you do 500,000 IQ tests and you get the scores and compare them with male and female scores, the averages are equal. When you go for section scores, that's where you see a difference. So you'll have the questions that say, look at this drawing, this figure. Now, which of these 5 matches that figure if you were looking at it upside down and backwards? And I want to stand on my head and see what else I can do to turn around. And males ace that. Just ace it. They can do that spatial ability so much better and easier in general. But then it comes to verbal tasks, and we're talking about antonyms and homonyms and synonyms, and women usually outscore males on those section scores. Any verbal task involving memory and intuition, they've also got better auditory memory. So you guys, if your wife says, 37 years ago, you said this to me, you probably did. You may not remember it, but you probably did. So you might want to be careful what you say, because they'll hang on to it. And intuition is up here in the right quadrant of your brain behind your right eye. So males or females can access that part of the brain for intuition. But because of the way the female brain is wired, we're going to talk about that, they have a 6th sense of intuitive knowing. Problem is that can't really explain the reason they have this strong impression that they ought to do this instead of that. Because it just comes as an intuitive snippet. And males are used to being able to tell you the steps their brain went through to come to a conclusion. Read my lips. Doesn't mean the conclusion was accurate. It just means they could tell you the steps their brain went through to come to this conclusion. Female brain doesn't do that. No printout. So when a woman says, I just have a really strong feeling we should do this, you might want to at least check it out. I remember the first time we took our 3, I married a man who had 3 little boys. I never know whether to call them just my kids, because they are. But I married their father when they were 3, 4, and 5. So I became an instant stepmother. I remember the first time we took him to Disneyland. I'd been telling him some of this stuff about the brain. We get to Disneyland, long lines. I said, you know, I have a feeling we should go straight over to the other side of Disneyland and work back. You know, I think there might be less people over there. People seem to be stopping right here. And one of the boys said, but I want to do the Matterhorn. It's right here. I said, well, we'll get to the Matterhorn, but look at the lines. And so he wanted to argue, and I refused to argue. I said, I think we should go to the other side. One of the other boys says, come on, you guys, you know there's no printout. Just go with it. So we went over to the other side, and we had hardly any lines for the first half of the day. So women are less skilled drivers. They have fewer accidents. Males have 14% more accidents per mile driven, but that's not because they're not more skilled drivers. It's because they tend to act out their emotions. You know, they kick the cat, you know, slap the kid, go out and, you know, do exhibition of speed in their vehicle. Enter DTI. I mentioned this morning. Brand new type of brain scan, and I love it. Special brain scanning technique that measures the flow of water along this long axon, the largest projection from a neuron. This is a drawing of a neuron. It is especially helpful when you're looking at the right hemisphere that has more of the brain's white matter. Because think fiber optics, these axons have to be wrapped with insulation, and the insulation is myelin, which is white in color. That's why when I say you have a gray glove on your left hand and a white glove on your right hand, it's because there's more of these long axons in the right side of the brain. So when they do DTI scanning, they get a map, a neural map. It's a map of how the neurons are connected with each other, and it's called a connectome. So you can see which places go where. And of course, again, they just don't want to look at one type of brain. They want to see how this brain is different from this brain. And of course, here we go again, male and female brains. 100 regions. This is really relatively new technique, and they've already identified 100 regions, the connectivity between 100 different regions in the brain. And, no surprise, there's a difference in the connectivity patterns in a male brain compared to a female brain. So here's a side view of a connectome in a male brain. You can see that a lot of the connections are running up and down in each hemisphere. And here's the cerebellum. Remember when we showed a cutaway of the brain? There was the brain stem and that little cerebellum. Well, here's the cerebellum. There's the brain stem. And there was only one place in the entire brain where the male brain had more connections between the hemispheres than up and down within the hemisphere, and that was down here in the cerebellum, and that's where it's linked to motor control. So I was talking about the Winter Olympics. The one I love is when they have this huge hill, and the skiers come down the hill, and then they go up and flip around 47 times, backwards and forwards and up and down, and then they land on their skis. I mean, that's amazing. Those are the males. There's no women that have been able to achieve that. Women do that sport, but not at that level. And we think that's linked with this motor control down here in the cerebellum. I mean, they see it in their brain. It just translates. They act it out in their muscle spatial part of the brain. Now, here's a look down on a male brain. How does that grab you? Amazing. We had no idea. Who knew? They're running up and down in each side, and the only place there was more connectors across was down here in the cerebellum. And researchers think that gives males their gifted spatial skills, their motor muscle control, map reading, direction finding, vehicle driving, and translating perception into what they need to do to excel at a variety of sports that women just don't seem to do as well. So, caveat. Mostly up and down on each hemisphere, connectors. Very little going back and forth. What does that mean? It means that you males, in essence, have two somewhat independently operating brains inside your skull. The good news, takes you a lot less energy to run. Because if you're in the right side of the brain, everything on the left side is kind of idling. Not much is going on. Lights are out, air conditioning's out. You're not over there, you don't need it, don't spend the energy. So it takes less energy to run your brain. Not true for the female brain, we'll talk about that. And we'll talk about the consequences or the outcomes of that. So take a look at the female brain from the side. What looks different? Not a whole lot going up and down, is there? But there's a ton going crossways between the two hemispheres. It's amazing. And especially connecting the two frontal lobes of the brain. Just mega connections. In fact, some of the researchers say, think of the female brain as having a 5-lane highway between the two hemispheres. Think of the male brain as having one very narrow single road connecting the two hemispheres. It's not good or bad, but it's very different. So look at it now from the top looking down. Just amazing. Look at this. It's crowded with highways across the two hemispheres. And researchers believe this accounts for better verbal skills, intuitive ability. See, intuition is right up here in the right frontal lobe. But if you're a male brain and you're in the right hemisphere, you can access intuition. But the female brain, back and forth all the time, pulls from a larger pot of memory, if you will, which can help it come up with an intuitive leap. That's where it's called the sixth sense of intuitive knowing, that the male brain doesn't do. So what's the trade-off? It doesn't take as much energy to run the male brain. But the female brain has an expanded sense of intuition, picking up information and putting it together that they often don't even realize is happening. We mentioned the memory tests, recalling words. Probably generally better at remembering faces. I usually can remember a face that I've seen before. I will have no clue where I saw it. And so I'll need to say to somebody, where did I last see you? And they'll say, oh, at Big Camp in wherever, or Townsville, or Melbourne. And oh yeah, then I can put that face in a location, but I won't have any idea. And I won't know the name. Because names are over here, and this is my right frontal lobe where I have my energy advantage. So, you know, it's not because I don't want to remember names, it's my brain doesn't go there. I'm lucky I remember mine most days. So, you know, just tell me your name if it's important to you. And social cognition tests that try to measure empathy and emotional intelligence. Again, because men and women, we're talking about emotional intelligence tomorrow morning, some of the new research. Males and females, they don't have an edge on each other, but it seems that it's easier to measure those kinds of assessments in the female brain because they've got easy access to the whole brain, and it will depend what side of the brain the male happens to be in when he takes the test. So there they are, side by side. And I think it's just staggeringly interesting. I mean, who knew? So here's the male brain with most of the connectors running top to bottom in each side. And here's the female brain, most of them running side to side and heavily clustered, you know, between those two frontal lobes. So the brain differences, you know, up until puberty, you do connectome DTI research on young people's brains and they look all the same. But when puberty kicks in and they're in the adolescent phase, that's when the brain starts to rewire itself, which is fascinating. So that happens with consequences, though, because when a child hits puberty and then goes into adolescence, just think about what's happening in their brain to rewire it so they're this different. I mean, imagine that they're repaving the roads in your town for 5 or 6 years. Takes a long time. And while they are in this process, their brains are stressed, but they're also 2 or 3 hours behind the time clock of people whose brains are supposedly done, mid to late 20s. So you want to go to bed at 10 o'clock, and the teenagers in your family, I don't even want to think about going to bed till 1. But then our school system is, a quarter of a century behind this research, so they're supposed to get up at 6 and leave the house at 7. For school, it starts at 7:30. That's not working for their brains. What was amazing to me is I was in Sydney 10 days or so ago, and every once in a while I'll turn TV on to get the news, because television's very different in different countries. I mean, your advertisements are hysterical. I mean, I love to watch them. They're funny. So I turned on the news, and here was, I don't know who he is, but some bigwig in Australia. And we've been talking about some of these differences in the United States. I've been talking about them for a decade or two, even though we didn't have this research, but we had observational stuff. And he said, we've got new research about how the male and the female brains are wired. I nearly fell off the bed. And he says, we got to take another look at when school starts. I'm going, yes. He said, we really need to think about starting school for adolescents about 10 o'clock in the morning. And maybe 11 o'clock for some, and certainly through college. So that if, they go to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, they want to get up at 8 or 9, their brains are starting to be ready to learn about 10 or 11. He said, we might as well, we're spending all this money on education, we might as well do it at a time that it works for their brain. And I'm thinking, I should live so long. I should live so long. I wish there were some schools who'd be willing to do this. Just bite the bullet and change the hours and see if we couldn't reduce the dropout rate. See if we couldn't raise the test scores, because the brain would be a little bit better ready to understand. A little bit about brain and emotions. There are 4 core emotions. We're going to talk about them tomorrow morning. Based on PET scan studies, positron emission tomography, it appears that when a person is joyful and happy and thinking positively, either gender, it's the left hemisphere that lights up on PET scan studies. When any of the 3 protective emotions pop up, that would be anger, fear, or sadness, it's the right side of the brain that lights up. Now, so protective emotions are on the right. Speech, Broca's area, is up here in the left frontal lobe. So you can see that with this huge, this is what I've been lecturing with for a decade. Because McGill University, doing post-mortem evaluations on the brain, found that the corpus callosum is just huge in the female brain, relatively speaking. It's got larger diameter axons and more of them. So this is what I've been lecturing from. Now I got this. So speech is up here, frontal left lobe, and a huge highway between the 2 hemispheres. So if a protective emotion surfaces in the right hemisphere, anger, fear, sadness, females can easily express the emotion in words because they got this huge highway of connections between the frontal lobes. It's more difficult for males to express emotions verbally because they've got a smaller highway, and it takes a lot more effort to get over there. So if he's in the left hemisphere, he may not even pick up quickly on the protective emotion. But if he's in the right hemisphere, then speech is over here. It's much more difficult for him to articulate verbally, and that's the reason we think that males have 14% more accidents per mile driven. Because they're in the right hemisphere, they recognize the emotion, they're not verbalizing it, they're going to act it out and go out and crash the car and stuff like that. So, what happens? Well, let's say that a male is in the right hemisphere. Comfortable, lights on, AC working well. Speech is over here, but in the same part of the brain where you handle speech, you also use tools. So, a woman will say, "Hon, I'd like you to come and hang these levelers or install the plantation shades or whatever." Okay, that happens over here. He's here. So he's likely to say, "All right, when I'm done with this." And she goes, "What do you mean when you're done with that? Can't you do it now?" And he goes, "I'd like to finish this first." "But why can't you stop and do this now and go back to that?" Because that's what the female brain is used to doing. So she's over here, she thinks of something that she didn't get finished over here, whip over on the highway, 5 lanes, no problem. Now she remembers she didn't finish that, okay, over there, back here. You know, as one of the highway patrol in California said, women spend a lot more time on the highway, don't they? Yeah, they do, and it's easy, fast, no speed limit. But for him to stop doing what he's doing in the right hemisphere, he's got to turn the lights out, turn off the AC. He's got to get on this little minuscule 1-lane road, really not that easy to drive on. Now when he gets over here, he's got to turn all the lights on. He's got to turn on the AC. And now he's ready to think about using his tools. Okay, that can take 7 seconds. And so when you don't get that, she's mad because he doesn't want to stop now, and he's frustrated because she wants him to stop now. So what's the solution? I tell women, make a list. Post it somewhere. He knows what happens in his brain. Well, most of the time. And he knows what he's doing and what it will take to do that. And when he decides to move over into this part of the brain, then look at the list, gentlemen, and do everything that you need to do in this side of the brain. And if you're in the other side of the brain and she's pushing you to hang the picture, we've got company coming tonight, you know, you can make a choice. You can say, well, we've had company for 19 years with no picture there. And I really don't want to turn everything off and go across the highway right now. Or you can decide to do it, but at least you know the process. And that never happens in the female brain. That's why it takes longer, takes more energy to run. Because it doesn't matter where we are in the brain, everything's on. The lights, the AC, you name it, it's all running all the time. Taking more energy, but it means we can zip back and forth. The female brain processes more emotive stimulants through more senses and more completely than does the male, and verbalizes emotive information quickly. Boys can sometimes take hours to process emotively and manage the same information as girls. So when you know that, you can, by design, choose to deal with people more effectively. And I watched this in school nursing. I worked in school nursing for several years. So something happens on the playground and boys and girls are involved. And the teacher comes out to solve the problem. Then the little girl immediately starts talking. You know, a blue streak. This is what happened. That's what they did. They shouldn't have done it. It's not fair. Do something. The little boy's just standing there like a numbskull. He's not got any words to say. He doesn't even, it's going to take him maybe till tomorrow to even process what happened. It's not good or bad. It's different. And the teacher doesn't know that, so she's badgering him, you know. Say something. Talk to me about this. What do you think? Well, I'm going to send you to the principal's office until you can talk to me. Lack of understanding about the brain. It's not going to happen. You know, one of the other things that we see also, sort of related to this, is the fact that women are always telling kids to look at them when they're talking to them. Any of you men ever had that happen to you? Look at me when I'm talking to you. They don't want to look at you. They already looked at you once. They know what you look like. They don't want to look at you. And this goes back to 3 days of age, because we're a combination of nature and nurture, you know, genetics and epigenetics, and your microbiome and your virome and all of these new things that we're finding out that's kind of fun and also kind of scary. So if you can do an assessment with babies really young, hopefully before the age of 3 days, then you hope that you're getting some of the differences without the interference of learning in the environment. And it's never going to be totally clean. But for example, here's one of the tests. Put 50 bassinets out here, line them up, 25 girl babies, 25 boy babies. They're all 3 days old. And now they have a graduate student at each bassinet, and they've got people taking videos and watching every little thing that happens. And so the first thing they do is they hold a big picture of a real human face over each bassinet, and they watch what the babies do. And the little girls look at the picture, and they look at the face, and they look at the face, and they'll keep looking at that face almost as long as you'll hold it up there. Little boys look at the face, look away, and they may never look back at the face again. It's just fascinating. So now you translate that to adulthood. When women are talking to each other, they are usually directly looking at each other, and they may just stand there a whole hour and pretty much talk while they look at each other. Males never do that, unless they're locked up somewhere because of a malfunctioning brain. When you watch two men talk together, and if you look around, the airport's a wonderful place to watch this. You'll see one man facing this way talking. His friend is facing this way talking. Occasionally they'll glance at each other, but they're looking around, talking away. They are not looking at each other. So you say to little boys, look at me when I'm talking to you, and it's going to shut down their brain, because that's not what they do. Give them a toy to play with and talk to them, and they'll probably listen to you and get most of what you say. And that's where I have concerns with religion, because these little kids are supposed to come in and sit down and listen. Not going to happen. But you give them little quiet toys to play with. I don't care if they're under the pew. And then you ask them, what did you hear this morning? And you'd be amazed at what a 4-year-old can tell you, who would know nothing if you told them to sit down and shut up and pay attention. It's just huge. So map reading and direction finding. Oh, this is so much fun. Here again, this now dovetails into this new connectome research, because the visual spatial abilities for map reading, direction finding, appear to be equal in boys and girls until about age 8. Okay, that's when puberty starts kicking in and so on. There's only one culture, as far as I know, that's been studied where in adulthood males and females have equal direction finding ability, and that's in the state of Alaska with Native Alaskans. And it doesn't matter whether you're 3 or 4, male or female. You can take your 3 dogs and your sled and go out and explore, and 3 days later come back when you've run out of food. And so in adulthood they seem to have pretty well equal direction finding abilities, but that's the only culture so far that we know of. So in adulthood, males typically have better direction finding ability, period. The question is, they can get where they need to go, no question. for most of them. The question is, how fast can that occur? Because sometimes, depending on the topography, you know, even they take a little bit longer than usual. My husband and I were in New Orleans, staying right almost across the street from the Superdome, and I had to be there for meetings to present at 8:30 on a certain morning. I can see the Superdome. I figure it's not going to take us long. So I say, why don't we leave about 8 o'clock? That should get us there by 10 after. I'll have a few minutes to set up, and it's fine. So I said, do you know how to get there? Oh, I can find it. That should have been my first clue. Yes, he had a good sense of direction. It's just that it didn't always kick in the time frame that I needed. So he gets in the car and starts driving. It so happens that in New Orleans, there are multitudes of one-way streets. Multitudes. And we kept getting farther away. I mean, it was receding in the distance. And I'm looking at my watch, and it's 5 after 8, and it's 10 after 8, and I said, it's getting farther away. Oh, he says, I'll get there. And I'm going, I know, but I need to get there today. And then I made a tactical error in judgment. I said, why don't we stop and ask for directions? He said, I don't need directions. I can get there. I said, I know you can, but I need to be there in just a few minutes. Well, he said, if we stopped, it'd probably be some 18-year-old kid anyway. It wouldn't, you know. I was getting desperate. So I said to him, I have to go to the bathroom. Can you stop at a filling station? Oh, fine. So he pulls in a filling station. I get out and run in. I used the bathroom so I wasn't lying. Because lying suppresses immune system function. Probably one of the reasons it's a 10 commandment. But as soon as I used the bathroom, I went to the 18-year-old kid, and I said, I need to get to the Superdome. How's the fastest way to get there? Oh, ma'am, he says, it's really easy. He says, you just go out the parking lot, turn right, make 5 right-hand turns, and you'll end up right in the parking lot. So I got back in the car, and I said, turn right, make 5 right-hand turns, we'll be in the parking lot. He said, I thought you said you had to go to the bathroom. I said, I did, start driving. But I also asked the 18-year-old. And we managed to get there. So, a little bit summary, we've pretty much talked about this. It's the testosterone thing, you know, that gives the males the increased accidents. Because of all of these highways across the 2 hemispheres, women have increased sensitivity to environmental conditions. Again, we were driving. I was driving this time, and he was asleep. And all of a sudden, we ran into a hailstorm. Now, I'm talking about a hailstorm. We were not talking quail eggs. We were talking Rhode Island red eggs, big eggs, that size, thumping on the metal of the car. And that was so distracting to me, and I'm auditory, that I just was actually getting rattled. So I reached over and poked him, and I said, you're going to have to drive. I said, this is just too stressful for me. And he yawns. He says, okay, fine. I got to pull over. He says, not here. I said, what do you mean not here? He goes, look at the size of the hail. I said, I know, that's why I want you to drive. Yeah, but he says, at least find an overpass. So we pulled under an overpass, and he started driving. And he did a beautiful job, but he was so completely focused that he never heard a word I said. Not a word. But he handled it a whole lot better than I did. And this is where we get kids in the car crying and pets jumping all over the place. And it gets the female driver distracted more so than with males. Here's a study that we think helps to explain this wiring difference and the reason that males exhibit certain behaviors. You put 30 male primates in a cage, lock them in, give them 24 hours, And they will have rank ordered themselves from 1 to 30 in a pecking order. Happens every time. And you know that because you take blood samples and you follow the level of cortisol, how much of that stress hormone is available. And the higher on this hierarchical pecking order, the less cortisol the primate has in his body. Because the higher you go up, I guess, the less stressed you are. I keep thinking about the press in the United States, and I have questions about that, but that does seem to be what happens. You put 30 female primates in a cage, they never rank order themselves, 1 to 30. It does not happen. Instead, they'll have a little collection of a few little primates in each group, maybe half a dozen groups for 30, 5 in each group about. And then we have a group leader, but they never hierarchically order themselves like male primates do. So the deal about males is that the person who's higher on the hierarchical organizational drawing, schema, whatever, has the lowest level of cortisol, but is perceived to be of a higher rank. And males don't want to do anything that might lower their rank. Which means they can't ask a question, especially of an 18-year-old, because that would put that 18-year-old higher on the hierarchical organizational chart than they are. It's all artificial. But that's what happens. And I tell males, I mean, come on, just because primates do it doesn't mean you have to. I mean, you're perfectly capable of asking a direction, and it's really got nothing to do with your hierarchical position unless you make it so. But it's no problem for a female to ask because everything is horizontal and flat. So you ask a question, fastest way to get information. It's got nothing to do with who's more important than anybody else. And now we know that it has to do with this. But just because that's how we are wired as a tendency doesn't mean you have to go there. But that's probably also the reason it's not a problem to ask, stop at a gas station, I don't care how old the kid is. You know, they actually might know the town. Give us the information. So let's finish up with this. Probably partly because of the wiring, but for whatever reason, when you ask a female for directions, they tend to give you object-specific directions using landmarks. So I ask a woman for directions. I'll say, I want to go to Dr. Grubb's house, assuming I'm driving. I'm not driving in this country, so maybe we better talk about the United States. I still catch my breath when I'm in a car with somebody and they turn the opposite way that we would in the States. So I've asked a female for directions, and it'll go something like this. Oh, I know where that is. So here's the deal. You go out here and you turn right. You'll be on a main street. So you just start driving down the main street. You're going to come to several signal lights. Go till you see a Golden Arches, a McDonald's on the right-hand side. Don't stop or anything. You just know that you're on the right road. So keep going. You'll go through several more signals, and then you're going to see a big library on the left. You know you're on the right way. Don't turn in. Just keep driving. And then you come to a very large school on the left. That's where you want to turn. Okay, so you turn, you go past the school. Now you go down here for a long way. I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes of driving if you're doing the speed limit. And then you'll come to a white fence. Drive all along the white fence. Don't turn. Just keep driving along the white fence. After you've come to the end of the fence, then you want to start counting driveways on the right. You'll come to one house that's just gorgeous, but they got chickens running around in the yard. That's not where you want to turn. Okay, got the general drift? I know exactly where to go. Exactly. The average male, I'm giving him those kind of directions. His eyes are glazed over when I tell him about the golden arches. And he's completely lost the rest of it because they don't do landmark stuff in general. And he'll usually smile politely and say thank you and go find a male to tell him how to get there. It's very, very different. So I'm asking a male for directions. I pull into a gas station because I'm lost. I get lost a lot because I don't have a good sense of direction. Walk in and I say to this hunk, not so over the hill, I can't recognize a hunk. So here's this hunk. And I go, I'm lost. And he goes, well, what can I do to help you? I said, I want you to tell me where to go. Well, he says, I don't know where to tell you to go unless I know where you've come from and where you want to go. I said, I don't know where I've come from, but I can tell you that I want to go to blah, blah. Oh, he says, that's not a problem. He says, you go out of the gas station and you go south for about 4 kilometers. And then you turn west for a couple of kilometers. Then you turn south again, maybe a couple 100 yards. Now you want to go east. And after about 6 kilometers, you'll turn left when you come to a 4-way stop, and then you're almost there. Which way is south? At which point, he looks thunderstruck. I mean, it's the deer in the headlights look. And he goes, Madam, you don't know which way is south? No, sir, I know up and down. How can you not know which way is south? I don't know, but my brain doesn't know it. Well, he says, stand this way. Go out the driveway. Turn this way. That's south. Oh, okay. All right, so you said to go south for about 4 kilometers, and then you told me to go west. Now I got to put myself in the map. Okay, let's see. If I'm looking at a map, there's north, there's south. Okay, which way is west? I think west is this way, but if I'm standing this way, it's hopeless. So I'll say thank you very much, and I'll go find a woman who can tell me where McDonald's and the library are. And we get mad at each other. That's insane. We have different brains. So males give distance-specific directions, and usually north, south, east, and west. My brain doesn't go there, folks. So, but I do have fun with it. I remember the look on that guy's face. I don't know what he went home and told his girlfriend, but it must have been funny. This old bat came into the station today, and I think she's already losing it. Because I told her to go south, and she looked at me and she said, which way is south? I know up and down. So I hope it gave him some amusement. So it is not right or wrong, good or bad. We are different, and we're different because we've been wired differently. And I tell people, think about a stick shift and an automatic. As far as I'm concerned, they're equally valuable. In San Francisco, I'll take the stick shift because of all the hills. But, if you get in an automatic and try to drive it like a stick, you're in trouble. If you get in a stick and try to drive it like an automatic, you'll leave the parts of the car on the road, whatever that is, the drive shaft or something. So we're different, and you have a choice. Understand the differences, laugh about them. It's a choice. Tell people, I have no idea which way is south. And I know that has nothing to do with whether I'm dumb or smart. It has to do with my brain just doesn't do that. If you can, women, You know, if I'm at home, I do have some sense about where north, south, east, and west is because I've paid attention. So if some male asks me, I can really say, oh, where you want to go is north. Fine. I haven't told him which way to turn. He already knows where north is. I remember I was talking to one man, and he says, oh, I know what. I had been picked to be interviewed on some kind of spontaneous, I think I was at a circus or something with my cousins, and they asked me if I'd come up and talk to the host. Not easy for me to do because my brain is really rather very introverted. I mean, this is no problem. This is one-to-one with a group of people, but you know, 500 people line up to talk to me, So I go up on stage, and he said, tell me, where are you from? And I said, from Canada. And he just stood there and looked at me. And I said, you know, that's the country up there. He said, really? I didn't know we had any satellites with countries. And I said, I mean, it's north. Well, he says, north is that way. Makes a great story, and I laughed about it for weeks. So take your pick. Be frustrated, decimate your relationship, or understand it and laugh about it and have fun and collaborate together. And that, to me, is the best of both worlds. Thank you very much.